I've used smartwatches ever since the very first Pebble, and the Google Pixel Watch is probably the happiest I've been with any wearable I've owned. First, a bit of context here. I've jumped between Samsung's Tizen watches and Wear OS over the past few years, and most recently I was wearing a 5th gen Fossil HR. And if you know anything about the state of Wear OS 2 watches, you'll know how rough that experience was compared to the newer Wear OS 3. It's hard to quantify just how much better it is compared to where Wear OS was just a couple of years ago. And that's just as well because it's taken what seems like forever for the Pixel Watch to actually arrive, giving Samsung almost a year and a half of effective platform exclusivity. But for me and the way I use smartwatches, the wait has been worthwhile. And so with the benefit of a couple of months of use and some new software updates, it's time to take a look at why I love the Pixel Watch and the 1-2 places where I think there's still some work to be done. Take a sec to subscribe and we'll jump in. A watch you're expected to wear all the time is first and foremost a fashion item, and the Pixel Watch definitely does not disappoint in this department. Sure, you can say it's just a round Apple Watch, and from a distance that's kinda true, but Google has still nailed it in my opinion from a design perspective. The Pebble-like aesthetic is simple, futuristic and elegant, while being neutral enough to be worn by any gender. The large glass dome makes gesture input feel natural, and it's framed simply by this stylish stainless steel casing. Something I dislike about a lot of smartwatches is how they try and look like a traditional timepiece and often in the process just end up looking cheap by comparison. It reminds you what the watch isn't, not what it is. The Pixel Watch, like the Apple Watch, doesn't try to be something that it isn't. That same design philosophy is what I loved about the original Moto 360 all those years ago, that seems like it was forgotten by a lot of smartwatches that have come and gone since then. I'm currently using the active band that came with my Pixel Watch while I wait for the nice looking but pricey metal bands to become available. It's fastened similarly to an Apple Watch, kind of, and attached via a push and slide mechanism that's kinda hard to capture on camera. That ensures that no lugs are needed, in keeping with the watch's ultra clean, uncluttered appearance. Physically, this thing is a lot smaller than I was expecting. Good news if you have smaller wrists, but less ideal for information density. A tiny watch means a tiny display, plus the relatively large bezels of the Pixel Watch means it's sometimes harder to glance at a message or an email than, for example, Samsung's larger Galaxy watches. But the bezels, if you like, aren't something that you really notice otherwise, because the design of most of the watch faces and Wear OS 3.5 itself more generally, they all disguise the boundaries of that OLED quite effectively. I've never had any trouble seeing the display, even in bright daylight, though it is January right now and bright direct sunlight isn't exactly in abundance in this part of the world. As a Wear OS veteran, the layout of the software here is pretty familiar to me. The watch face lives in the middle, then you swipe right or left to hop through your tiles, down for settings and up for notifications. What's less familiar is the level of polish and performance in this product, far smoother and superior design-wise compared to any previous Wear OS watch. It shines an even brighter light on how decrepit that old software was towards the end. Meanwhile, the crown brings up your app list, and this upper button here is used for multitasking. Tap once for recent apps or twice to launch back into the most recently used app. And you can use double tap of the crown to launch Google Pay, even though I still feel like kind of an idiot reaching over to pay with my watch. The crown itself can also be used for vertical scrolling, of course, and the haptic feedback that accompanies that is pretty close to the sharpness of the nudges produced by Apple's Taptic engine. It's subtle, but always noticeable. This is where we get to my particular use case. For me, if it takes more than a few seconds to accomplish something on the watch, I'm just going to pull up my phone instead. So I tend to have just a small handful of apps that I actually use with any regularity. Otherwise, I'll just be checking the time, the weather, maybe quickly replying to a message. And despite the small display size, the Pixel Watch is actually great for this kind of use. Even Google's tiny keyboard here isn't horrible to use despite the screen size. Google Assistant is of course built right in as well, and I found it really useful for the occasional times where I want to start the timer or something, or set an alarm, and maybe my phone's in my pocket. Fitbit is another one of my regular apps, and of course a big focus for this device, which is the first Google branded product to have type Fitbit integration. Mostly I've just used it for tracking runs as opposed to actually viewing any of my information in the Fitbit app on the watch. If I want to do this, I'll just use the much larger display on my phone. The Fitbit exercise UI though is great, and I've noticed the distance tracking for runs to be a bit more accurate than the old Fossil watch I was using before. A lot has been written about the Fitbit features this watch doesn't have. For example, it can't detect atrial fibrillation or irregular heartbeats. And other features you'll find on an actual Fitbit, like automatic starting of exercise tracking, blood oxygen and skin temperature monitoring, are absent too. So the Fitbit branding you'll find on the box perhaps sets expectations a bit high, but for the kind of exercise tracking I do day to day, I find it perfectly fine. And for the design and software experience I get with the Pixel Watch, I find it's a worthwhile trade-off. What's less great is the need to subscribe to Fitbit Premium to get insight into stats beyond the past week. Those 6 months of Fitbit Premium are included with the Pixel Watch, as well as the way Google Fit integrates with it, since Fitbit has replaced Fit on the watch itself. Fitbit can sync to Google Fit through the Health Connect app, but it's not always clear how much telemetry is shared between the two. For example, GPS information for runs is less detailed in Fit than Fitbit, whereas that detail was available in Fit through older Wear OS watches. Health Connect in Google Fit in its current form also seems like kind of a stopgap solution, and I can't help thinking that Google Fit itself has all the hallmarks of an app headed towards the Google graveyard. That's not a huge deal if you don't have historical data tied up in Google Fit, but if you do, like me, there's still no official way to transfer that over to Fitbit, which pretty obviously seems to be Google's platform of choice for health data going forwards. Battery life is another area where this watch was criticized in a lot of early reviews, and granted, I haven't been using my Pixel Watch on LTE, but for me, it's been perfectly fine. I never had it run out of juice in under a day, and typically ended with 20 to 30% remaining at around midnight. That's with typical use for me involving taking off the charger at 7 AM, using it to track a 30 to 40 minute run, and the rest of the time mainly using it for notifications, timer, checking the weather, that kind of thing. That's not hardcore use, but I did have the always on display enabled and was using it obviously both indoors and outdoors. The Pixel Watch didn't give me the kind of multi-day longevity that you can get out of some of Samsung's larger watches, but it's cleared the admittedly quite low bar set by my older Wear OS 2 watches. Like most wearables, the Pixel Watch charges over the magic of magnetic induction, and on the few occasions where I did forget to charge it overnight, I was always able to take it from around 10% to about 50 or so in the time it takes to take a shower. But there is one nagging annoyance with the way it charges. Despite using Qi, good luck using anything besides the official Google charger to power it up. It won't work on the back of a phone even with the strap removed, and no other Qi cable or dock I tried would work either, so if you lose that one cable, that'll be another $30 and 3 to 5 days waiting for delivery. So after more than 2 months with the Pixel Watch, this is comfortably my favorite Android smartwatch ever in almost 10 years of wearing them. It does somewhat feel like I'm underusing this watch though. I haven't used LTE with the Pixel Watch just because I'm never in a situation where that's useful and it's not really worth the extra cash to add it to my plan. I could use navigation through Google Maps on here, but it's almost always more convenient to just pull out my phone. And in terms of calls, I'm generally using it to decline robocalls as opposed to actually making or taking calls from people I know. I guess what I'm saying is I'm a pretty basic smartwatch user, and chances are you in the majority are too. And that's fine. For what I need out of a smartwatch and for what a lot of you probably need too, the Pixel Watch has all the bases covered and looks great while doing so. So I'm going to keep using this watch with my Android phones for the foreseeable future, and we'll see how it holds up over time. One thing I know from previous Wear OS devices is these have been prone to bit rot and performance issues over time, so hopefully that won't be the case this time around. I'll revisit the Pixel Watch when it gets its next major software update, or when the watch itself reaches, say, the 1-year mark. Stick around and subscribe to see that. In the meantime, if you have a Pixel Watch, drop a note in the comments, let me know how you're liking it. Thanks for watching, no pun intended, and I'll see you next time.